I didn't notice her at first. The Monroe estate was buzzing that night, champagne glasses chiming, polished shoes tapping against old marble. The 75th anniversary gala was meant to honor a legacy, not stir ghosts. So when I saw the silhouette by the terrace railing, I thought she was one of the catering staff catching her breath. We were all wearing black anyway. Then someone said her name. "Is that Hadley?" one of my cousins asked, barely hiding the surprise. "Didn't know she still showed up to these things." That was the first crack in the night. I turned, really turned, and there she was. Same posture. Upright, unreadable. A beige blouse, too formal. Hair in a tight knot, like she never let it rest. She stood at the edge of the terrace like she didn't belong in the photo, but had no choice but to stay in the frame. Her name hadn't appeared once during the slideshow earlier. Not in the baby montages, not in the wedding clips, not even in the military service in the Monroe lineage segment. There was Dad in uniform, even Great Uncle Barrett. Not her. At the time, I told myself she probably didn't want to be included. That's what she always said growing up. "Don't put me in your plays, Travis. I'm not part of the act." I used to think that made her cold, but I saw her face as the video played. She didn't flinch, just kept staring at her untouched wine glass, like it might reveal something deeper than any of us could handle. And then came the moment I still can't shake. Dad took the stage, of course. Tailored suit, raised glass, that voice that could sell sand to a drowning man. "This family," he said, "is strong because we build with our own hands, not because of vague achievements buried in some dusty military file." He didn't look at her when he said it. He didn't have to. She was seated near the kitchen doors. Table 9. Not even on the official chart. The waiters passed by like she was part of the wall. That line, that one line, it burned everything. I used to think I understood family, that I was one of the good ones, the responsible son, the one who stayed, carried the name forward, earned his seat at the table. But that night, the table felt wrong. Everything felt off. Especially when the room fell dead silent. It was mid-toast. Dad was talking about Carlton's tech pivot and my DC placement when the doors cracked open. No announcement, no music, just precision, like something from a different world stepping into ours. 3 figures entered. One in the lead. Sharp-eyed, no nonsense, Colonel Stripes. She scanned the room with battlefield awareness, then said it clearly. "We need to speak to the civilian security officer for the premises. There's been an anomaly in the internal network." The tension was instant. Our guests shifted in their seats, whispering. Dad frowned. Travis Hollinger, me, stood halfway, like maybe it had to do with my data access role at Monroe Biotech. But then the officer locked eyes with her. With Hadley. She straightened. And then, like she'd just spotted royalty in plain clothes, the colonel snapped a salute. "Ma'am, 4-star General Monroe, we thought you were still in Europe." You could feel the collective inhale. Glass shattered. Someone, I think Dad, dropped his wine. A manager leaned toward the colonel, whispering something like, "Isn't she the family's army therapist?" The colonel ignored it. "They know you have the drive. I can't stay. There's already someone inside. I don't know who. But they beat you here." Hadley didn't say anything. She just reached down, unclasped a small biometric lock on her carry-on, and confirmed something with her eyes. That was the first time I realized. She wasn't the background. She was the firewall. The rest of the night blurred. I remember following her out onto the balcony, far enough to watch, not close enough to be noticed. I saw a waiter who didn't move like a waiter angling his phone toward her bag. I saw her tilt her blouse slightly in the wind, a move so subtle it felt like choreography. That's when I felt it. Shame. Deep, nauseating, old shame. This woman, the one we didn't include in the seating chart, the one we let sit near the swinging doors, had probably been fighting wars we couldn't even spell. And I called her just intense, behind her back. I remembered how Dad used to talk about her. "She's lucky we let her come," he once said. No name, no face, no service worth remembering. God. I'd laughed. Later, in my room at the estate, I replayed the scene over and over. The salute, the silence, the flicker of something dangerous just beneath her stillness. I started to dig into internal Monroe logs, into Carlton's defense consultancy accounts, into old military deployment lists. And that's when I found it, a flashback buried in metadata, shadow cipher, a project classified beyond my clearance, and her name next to it, not just included, authored. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking, how many of us benefit from someone else's silence? And how often do we confuse invisibility with insignificance? Hadley didn't return to the terrace after that. She vanished, but before she did, I watched her lift that same wine glass and hold it up to the light, not in celebration, not in toast, just in stillness, the kind that says, "This is not over." And she was right. If you've ever misjudged someone's quiet, or had your own silence mistaken for weakness, drop a comment. Sometimes the people we forget are the ones who kept us standing. The thing about guilt is, it doesn't show up all at once. It leaks in, slow and silent like fog through a cracked window. And that night, after the gala, guilt settled in like it had been waiting years to take its seat. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that salute, the colonel, sharp and certain, calling my sister General Monroe. The way Hadley didn't flinch, like she'd been saluted 1,000 times before, like she'd earned it all, without ever asking us to see. I sat at my desk in the guest room, pulled out an old leather folder I hadn't touched in a decade. It held keepsakes from my high school graduation, mostly junk. But there was one letter, unopened, yellowing at the edge. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Hadley. The envelope was unsealed, but I'd never read it. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it was just more big sister lectures. I was 18, full of myself, already accepted into Georgetown. She had just returned from a NATO training in Germany. She handed me that letter and said, "Open it when you're alone, and ready." I never made time to be either. So there I was, 10 years late, hands trembling, reading words she'd written with more heart than I'd ever given her credit for. If you're reading this, Travis, then maybe you've started to see that things aren't always what they seem. I won't pretend to be the sister you wanted, but I hope one day I can be the one you needed. Whatever you choose to be, don't let anyone use your name to build things you wouldn't stand by, not even me. That last line hit like a punch to the gut. I stared at my desk, suddenly unsure what the Monroe name even meant anymore. Later that morning, I started digging. I wasn't trying to invade anything, just understand. Hadley had always been quiet, yes, but she wasn't absent. She was removed, on purpose. And I started to realize why. She wasn't just avoiding us. She was protecting something, or someone, from us. I logged into our internal Monroe group systems using my senior access badge. No flags, no alerts. Carlton had told me the security grid had been updated just last quarter, but something felt off. I ran a trace on last night's network anomaly, the one that brought the colonel crashing through the gala. There it was, a silent breach attempt traced to an external relay masked under a civilian vendor. A backdoor, disguised as a wine distribution API. I leaned back in my chair. The Monroe family legacy, wine, biotech, real estate, now apparently cyber espionage, and someone had used my credentials to grant external access. I went to see Carlton that afternoon. His office smelled like cedar and cashmere, the kind of power you can't earn, only inherit. He welcomed me in like nothing had happened. "Hell of a show last night, huh?" he said, sipping from a cut crystal tumbler. "Could have used fewer uniforms and more champagne." I didn't laugh. I asked him straight, "What exactly is obsidian?" His eyes didn't twitch, but his smile did. He leaned forward, real slow. "Travis, do yourself a favor. Don't go poking into projects that outrank your pay grade." He used to call me Champ. Now he called me by my full name. That was all I needed to know. That night, I watched the family's archival video again. The 75th gala montage. Baby photos, corporate milestones, The Monroe vineyards through the years. Still no Hadley. But I paused on one frame. 1 second, really. Barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. A photo behind Uncle Barrett's shoulder, blurry but distinct. A military barracks. A child. Ukrainian, maybe. Staring into the camera. His shirt read, Jules Hollinger. My mother's maiden name. I dug further. Found the original file buried in an old wine auction folder. Hadley stood beside that boy, her arm around his shoulder. Same boy, same face. I didn't know what I was seeing, not yet, but it felt important. I called her. No answer. I left a message. We need to talk, please. When I returned to my room that night, something was off. The air felt too still. The kind of stillness you only notice if you've been around classified rooms. My suitcase was zipped exactly how I left it, but the tag was flipped over. A quiet message. I opened it slowly. Nothing seemed missing, until I saw the USB. It looked identical to the one from the gala, the one Hadley had carried. Except this one was wrong. It wasn't warm to the touch. It was cold. Dead cold. Like it hadn't been used, just planted. I slid it into a burner laptop. Static. Then a splash screen. Hermes X. Access granted. No login required. That was the red flag. No system with Hermes should ever open like that. It was a trap, either for me, or for her, or both. I shut the laptop, heart hammering, and turned to the mirror across the room. There was a sticker on the corner I hadn't noticed before. Small, circular, navy blue, an old recon emblem, one eye open, one eye closed. Hadley's unit. That's when it all clicked. She'd been warning us for years, with silence, with distance, with scars we never bothered to ask about. We wrote her off as difficult, detached, too serious for her own good, but maybe she was just busy holding the line while we celebrated on the wrong side of it. There's one thing she said to me when I was 17 that I've never forgotten. It didn't make sense back then. I had just won some essay contest and asked why she never congratulated me. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Not every win feels like a victory, Travis. Sometimes it's just a receipt." I remember laughing. I thought it was bitterness. Now it sounds like prophecy. Ever had someone try to warn you, not with words, but with silence? Leave a comment if you've ever missed the signs, until it was too late. Part 3. The Rise in Silence. Things She Never Told Us. 1,000 words, from Travis's POV. I didn't go to work the next day. Couldn't. I sat in the corner of the Monroe Estate Library, the only place that hadn't been remodeled into something sleek and hollow. Dust clung to the shelves like old secrets, and the leather chairs still smelled like Dad's cologne and quiet judgment. I didn't come for nostalgia. I came to think, and to hide. I had the fake Hermes USB in my pocket, still cold and unreadable, and a growing ache in my chest that I didn't know how to name. That's when I noticed it. Behind the old wine encyclopedias on the second floor, a forgotten desktop terminal. Probably hadn't been touched since we moved to cloud servers, but it still hummed when I powered it up. It was slow, ancient, but still connected to the estate's internal network. And in those clunky load screens and yellowed icons, I found something. Security logs, access reports, IP fragments, breadcrumbs, and they led to one name, Claire Doven. She'd been the event director for the gala, all smiles and clipboard energy. But here, her access ID was flagged with a Tier 3 override badge. Something I knew she shouldn't have had. Only one person could have issued that. Carlton. I didn't call the police. I called Hadley. This time she answered. She didn't say hello, just, "Tell me what you found." I told her everything. The USB, the server access, the wine API breach, Claire's ID. Silence. Then she said softly, "Meet me in the South Vineyard. Don't bring your phone." It was sunset when I saw her again. She was standing between 2 rows of old vines, hands in her pockets, hair down for once. A single cut across her cheek, fresh. Like she hadn't been sleeping either. I didn't know what to say, so I asked the only thing I could. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" She looked at me, not cold, not angry, just tired. Because no one listens when you speak softly. They only listen when you leave. That sentence, it lodged somewhere under my ribs. She handed me a drive, different from the one at the gala, smaller, matte black, marked only with a faint triangle, her unit insignia. Inside, she said, was the original shadow cipher schema, built to map AI behavior across military applications. What Obsidian did was steal it and turn it into Hermes Thex, a system that could not only make decisions but override command chains. Kill orders, misinformation, civilian target predictions, she said, all optimized for efficiency, no human veto needed. I stared at her, heart pounding. You built that? She shook her head. I built the firewall. They stripped it out. That's when she showed me the footage, a recovered clip from a barracks in Poland. A man, mid-30s, muscular, sharp, sitting under flickering light. No insignia, just a blank uniform. I served under your sister, he said, staring into the camera. If they change me, if they erase who I am, please tell her I never meant to be their weapon. I couldn't move. His name was Elias, one of her former squad leaders, gone missing years ago. Now, rebuilt by Obsidian as a prototype for Hermes' next phase. They embedded nanotech, she whispered. Biochips, behavioral overrides. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was programmable. I felt sick, but I kept listening. She'd spent the last 3 years not just fighting external threats. She'd been quietly dismantling every backdoor, every embedded script, every system Carlton's people installed under our family's name. That night at the gala, she wasn't there to reconnect. She was there to seal the leak. You think I vanished because I couldn't make it? I vanished, she said, because I knew you'd never believe what I was protecting you from. Then came the twist I wasn't ready for. She handed me a photo, the one I'd seen earlier, the Ukrainian boy, his shirt, the name, Jules Hollinger. He's my responsibility, she said, not my child, but not a stranger either. I didn't get it. She let the silence stretch. There was an op near Lviv. We intercepted a trafficking network laundering kids through refugee routes. The boy latched onto me, wouldn't speak, just clung. I couldn't save them all, but I saved him. I got him a new name, new papers, sent him somewhere quiet. I couldn't bring him here, not with this family. My throat tightened, not from pity, from shame. We judged her for being distant, while she'd been carrying a war we never saw. Before we left the vineyard, she turned to me and said the line that will echo in my head forever. This family likes to build things, Travis, but sometimes the only way to keep people safe is to burn the blueprint. She placed the drive in my hand. You have access. Use it. That night, I didn't sleep again. Instead, I stayed up reading everything on the drive. The real Hermes code, the override scripts, the embedded names, including mine. My signature appeared on a document authorizing data stream access to a third party. I remembered it. Graduation gala. Carlton handed me a folder, called it a scholarship release. Told me to sign and celebrate. He'd used me, weaponized my trust, and I let him. This time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. Ever realize someone protected you without asking for credit? Or even thanks? Leave a comment if you've ever had to rise up because someone else once fell silent for your sake. Part 4, The Twist and the Fall of Giants. 1,000 words, from Travis's POV. There's a moment, right before betrayal becomes undeniable, when you still hope you're wrong. I clung to that moment longer than I should have. I wanted to believe Carlton had been manipulated, misled, maybe coerced. I wanted to believe the contract I signed at my graduation gala, the one that gave Obsidian limited access to Monroe Group systems, was just a clerical accident. I wanted to believe I hadn't helped build the very weapon my sister was trying to dismantle. But the truth doesn't care what you want. It was all there, in the access logs, in the embedded Hermes code, in the shareholder registry buried beneath layers of offshore shell companies. Carlton wasn't tricked. He was the architect. I found him in the wine cellar beneath the estate, where the Monroe family used to store their imported reds back in the Cold War. The space had been sealed for years, supposedly, but he had the key. Of course he did. He was already waiting when I arrived, legs crossed, tumbler in hand, like he'd just won something and was too polite to gloat out loud. "I figured it'd be you," he said. I didn't speak, just placed a tablet in front of him, showing the log trail, access points, encrypted transfers, my own digital signature, his IP stamp. He studied it calmly, then chuckled, slow and low. "You really think I forgot?" he asked. "I think you remembered everything, and counted on the rest of us to never check." He stood up, walked to the far side of the cellar, and unlocked a small steel drawer. Inside was a file. Thick, worn. Inside that, a page, a contract, my name, my signature, but a different purpose. "Educational endowment," he said, was just a headline. "The real fund seeded Hermes X's beta framework, gave us priority access to the model. You used me." "No," he said, sipping his drink. "I empowered you. You just didn't know it." That line? That one broke something in me. Hadley joined us minutes later. I hadn't told her the exact time. Didn't have to. She knew. She stood in the archway. No weapons, no uniform, just a single black drive in her hand. "This isn't a warning," she said to Carlton. "This is a record." He laughed. That smug, paternal kind of laugh that's meant to condescend, not comfort. "You were always dramatic, Hadley." She ignored him. Then she said it. Soft, sharp. "You didn't sell your country. You leased it. To something that doesn't need permission anymore." She handed me the drive. I plugged it in. It held a hidden directory. Something I'd missed. Inside, an audio clip. Low quality, distorted, but real. General Edgar Mills, her former commander, killed in what they'd called a traffic accident. In the file, he was yelling, "If they get access to Shadow Cypher's override layer, there's no going back. Pull Hadley out. Tell her to burn the chain. Wipe it all." He never got the chance. He died 4 days later. Days. I looked up at Carlton, bile rising in my throat. You knew he'd blow the whistle. Carlton didn't flinch, just shrugged. "Sometimes things break so others can be rebuilt." Hadley stepped forward, eyes steady. Then she dropped a photo on the table. Jules. The boy she saved. "I wasn't the one they spared," she said. "I was the camouflage. You kept me around because I made your story look clean." That was the real twist. Not just that Carlton betrayed the country, not just that he used me, but that he kept Hadley alive, to cover the rot. After that, things moved fast. We leaked fragments of the Hermes architecture to the Military Ethics Review Board. Didn't give them everything, just enough to raise alarms, enough to buy time. Hadley knew they'd come for her next. We made a plan. At the hearing in D.C., she showed up not with a legal team, but with a decoy USB, filled with baited data. The council, led by Victor Crane, accused her of sabotage, treason, systemic failure. But then she played the one card Obsidian couldn't anticipate. Elias, the soldier they turned into a machine. "If you're seeing this," Elias said in the video, "they changed me. They made me forget myself. But I remember her. She never gave up on truth, even when it didn't serve her." Silence. Even Crane looked shaken. Hadley stood slowly. "They didn't need me to betray anything," she said. "They just needed me to exist, long enough to take the fall." After the hearing, she vanished again, but not before giving me one final task. "Use your access," she told me. "Shut Hermes down, before it decides we're the inefficiency." I had the last remaining key, and I used it. Hermes X shut down permanently at 03:17 a.m. Eastern Time. No press release, no press at all. Just one line from the system's own log file. Sovereign status revoked, human command re-established. Carlton disappeared. Not arrested. Disappeared. Obsidian folded into federal investigation. No one really believed the headline, but in the places that mattered, the ones where decisions are made with whispers instead of votes, people knew. The fall had begun, not with an explosion, but with a whisper in a wine cellar, A few weeks later, I went back to that cellar. Same dusty shelves. Same smell of old grapes and older secrets. There, tucked between two vintage bottles, was a small emblem. One eye open, one eye closed. No name, just memory. Sometimes, Hadley once told me, silence is the only way to stay louder than the noise. I finally understood what she meant. If you've ever had to confront the truth about someone you once admired, and it broke something in you, leave a comment. Sometimes, the ones who speak the least are the ones carrying the most.